0.5 trillion, that is Africa's GDP, and we will be learning how much of farming has contributed into that. But before we can get into that, we want to understand sort of how the climate change is affecting farmers here in Kenya, as well as our weather patterns. And to help us understand and of course have this conversation, for the sake of our audience who are just joining us right now after this break, allow me to reintroduce our panel this morning. So on this other side, we have Dr. Richard Mwita. He is a Senior Assistant Director for Climate Services at the Met Department. And sitting next to Dr. Richard is his namesake as well, Dr. Richard Monang. He is the Africa Regional Climate Change Program Coordinator in UNEP. And also joining us is Peter Wangai, who is a new tech farmer. We'll be hearing from him how he is using technology as a young farmer and how that is sort of helping him with farming. But Dr. Richard Mwita, let me begin with you. Perhaps help Kenyans understand the weather patterns and how they've changed in Kenya. Behind the scenes, we were discussing how perhaps 10 years ago, in 2009, you could perhaps predict the weather. You know, you knew May, June, July are cold months in Kenya. This time around, this year, June, July, we were seeing the sun. It was pretty hot. So just help us understand how climate change has changed our weather patterns in Kenya.
Thank you very much. A very good morning, Trevor, Zinzi. As you say, the weather looks different from maybe the past. However, we find some similarities in what is happening currently and some of the issues that have happened in the past. Having said that, of course, there are certain significant events that have happened. For example, we have seen the change in the frequency of droughts, dry conditions since the 1960s. We used to see about one major drought in every 5 years, like from 1956, 1960, 1972, 1976, 1979, 1981. But now come 2005, coming forward, then the frequency of droughts has increased incredibly, such that we started off with about 3 droughts, happening within maybe 2 years. But currently, almost every year, we have a drought situation, being, observed across the country.
Like this year?
Like this year, for example. Okay, like since 2016 up to last year, and actually even March this year, we have seen dry conditions become more and more intense as opposed to previously. So that's just an indication that other weather variables such as rainfall and maybe other variables have also been changing over time. Right. So basically, that's how it is.
We have an entire climate change action plan here in Kenya. What is missing on that strategy? Because now that you said that the frequency of drought is still as much as it's more now than it used to be before, and you still have that action plan. What is missing in your view?
Well, I guess nothing is missing because the national action plan, as well as the national climate change strategy, which was developed just a few years ago, about 2 or 3 years ago, actually lays down what should be done in terms of the actionable issues that Kenyans should do, and especially the critical sectors such as agriculture and the water sector.
Are they being done?
Well, that might not be within my jurisdiction, but I guess probably the government is doing as much as it can, plus our international partners such as the UN. I hope Dr. Richard here will give us more insights in terms of what they are doing. But generally, we have the national climate change strategy and also the action plan. And we have fantastic, let me say, plans that could help limit, alleviate, or possibly help Kenyans to cope with the impacts of climate change.
Right. What activities are we as Kenyans doing that has contributed to what you've just spelled out for us, the change of our rain patterns, how we've frequently seen more drought happening, etc. How is it, what activities are Kenyans doing to the environment that are helping bring about these effects?
To understand better what's happening in Kenya, is good to start from the global perspective. And we find that when you look at studies that have been carried out even by the IPCC, that is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, you find that there are reports that climate change has changed, and you could see that culminate in the Paris Agreement, where we see the global average climate has changed it is reached about 1.5 degrees centigrade on average, although there's varies across regions. Now coming to Kenya, you find that this has changed, and we can only see this if we look at the climate variables. For example, looking at temperature across the country since around 1850, coming forward to 2015, the temperature has changed from about 21.5 degrees to around 26.5 degrees.
26.5.
Yeah, but you see that's a span of over 100 years.
Yes.
So in essence, it means there's something that's happening in the background, and this can be split into two. We could have the human, influence as well as the natural. But in terms of the human influence, in regard to what you asked, basically I would attribute this much to land use changes. And also, of course, you see the population has increased. If we used to be a small family farming on 5 maybe acres,
yes,
today we might not be able to do the same. So in essence, the land use, the way we change in terms of even infrastructure development and so on over the years could have contributed, and possibly also even maybe using land where we are not supposed to use, possibly like in the catchment areas and so on. They could have a negative impact.
Right. Before I come to you, Dr. Richard Monang, you help us understand how farmers can cope with this climate change. Let me rope in Peter. Peter, you're a young farmer who is using technology. Yeah. When you hear Dr. Richard here explain how weather patterns in Kenya are changing, how is that affecting your farming, or rather, how has it affected your farming?
Let me say good morning, viewers. I'm Peter Wangai. That one has really affected farmers out there, and we are the people on the ground. And it has really affected farmers to an extent of some have even give up on farming because once you plant, you have used your investment capital. You are thinking that at the end of the day, I'll have something on the table, or I'll have some money on the table. You see, but in the middle, there is sun, and all the crops dries up. You see, so that has really made a lot of farmers out there to down their tools.
Are you getting any sort of support from the government, or some information that you're getting? Are you getting any sort of support from government?
Yeah, we are getting some support, but you see, it's not, as I always say, there is the need of public-private partnership. See, for the farmers who are in private farming and also the public, you see, once they come together, at least we will have 100% full support. Because you see, in a county like Nyandarua County, for example, for instance, that's a county that has a lot of rain, you know, throughout the year. But you find even when there is good lanes, also the problem with the sale of the crops is also, you know, it's also a problem,
right,
you know, to the market. So
Peter, help me describe for me how climate change has sort of, how it affects your business, your profits, your biashara, because you just said that you've seen a few farmers having to leave the industry, having to leave the biashara, because at the end of the day, perhaps they couldn't make ends meet. How describe that for me, boil it down for me, how climate change is affecting your pocket, the pockets of farmers.
First of all, you will find that, let's take, for example, Nyandarua County. Nyandarua County, when we were growing up, it used to be, every year, it used to rain. See, right now, it's not as it used to be a long time ago. So you will find that for us as the farmers, it's really affecting the output of the crops. It is really affecting even the people who are there, you know. So you find we are trying to make farmers out there understand that there is another way that they can farm apart from their own traditional ways of farming, like the outdoor farming, you know. So we are trying to tell them now, let's move away from the old traditional ways of farming. Let's go to greenhouse farming.
And that's what you have decided to tap on into.
And that is what we have decided as Golden Scape Group Limited to tap on.
Right, and you will come back to that and help us understand how this new farming is working, how it's doing. But Dr. Richard Monang, let me come back to you. How can farmers in Kenya, on the African continent, how can they start coping with this, coping with the change of climate patterns that we're seeing?
Yeah, thank you very much, Zingzi, and thanks, Trevor, and good morning to the viewers. I think Dr. Ari elaborated the changing climate, which is already with us today, so we're already living with it. And people are already seizing opportunities, as Peter has highlighted. But I think what needs to be done is to put this in context. Farmers are already coping, because the changing climate didn't start yesterday.
Yes.
It didn't start last year. Actually, for the past couple of decades, farmers and the entire continent have been living with it. And they've been actually using approaches that are not only seeing their yields increased. If you take, for example, in Kenya here, there is what is called the ecosystem-based adaptation approaches, which if you take a farmer in Makueni County have actually utilized less tillage, what is called conservation agriculture, and I've seen up to about 300% of increase in production. And you go out of Kenya to West Africa, in Burkina Faso, there is an approach, an indigenous approach called Zai, which is a technology that have been practiced over decades by indigenous people that have seen crops increase up to about 500%. So the issue is not the absence of coping mechanisms across the entire African continent. The question should then be, why are these not being brought to the fore and made the norm rather than the exception?
Exactly. So how do we empower our farmers? How do we get this information to a farmer who is in the village? How do we get this information to them? Because knowledge is power, information is power. How do we get it to them?
Indeed, knowledge is power and information is power. And I would like to put this within an African proverb. Knowledge without wisdom is like water in the sand. What that means is that there is no absence of knowledge. The indigenous people, the Mamambogas in villages are already coping, and they have the best experiences because they've lived through it.
Right.
And they know the context better than any other person. But what needs to be done is that they need incentives to be able to bring those best, excellent approaches, ecosystem-based adaptation approaches, climate-smart agricultural approaches, which will be used for over decades. And these incentives moves beyond just those approaches to bring in elements like financing. How can they be able to afford finance to get inputs like organic manure, like organic fertilizer? How can they be able to utilize what they have produced, whether it is a Mamamboga in a village that is producing vegetables, get access to a market? And how can they be able to ensure that they can dry their vegetables that they've produced so that they don't get spoiled and get thrown away? And these aspects are what have not been brought together. But just to put it in perspective and building on what Dr. Ri said, there is no absence of policies in the continent. If you take Kenya, for example, Kenya is actually a leader on climate change. Kenya was the first African country to be able to put in place a Climate Change Act in 2016. Within that Climate Change Act, it has what is called the National Climate Change Council, which is chaired by the President of the Republic. That means that climate change, within the political and policy perspective, have that highest endorsement. But at the same time, not only to stop that, when it comes to the operational level, just a couple of weeks ago, Kenya launched the biggest wind farm in the entire African continent, in Turkana. And more importantly, Kenya is actually sourcing up to 70% of its electricity from renewables. It means that Kenya and other African countries are actually leaders and leading on climate change. What has been the missing link is to be able to turn policies to reality to help inform action and also recalibrate those policies to help drive what is already happening on the ground to feedback and make sure that the science policy action linkages are actually done in such a way that they're not done in silos, but done in a complementary way.
So there's one thing that has always been happening. You were speaking earlier on about the farming patterns and also the market. So those are two different things for the farmers out there. But in terms of our carbon emissions, many people argue that we are not doing so badly off. So then why should we even change our style at this particular point? And what is the research showing in terms of Kenya's addition to the climate change, basically? What is our role and how can we reverse it, if there's any reversing of it?
The reality is that the entire African continent, with Kenya inclusive, is a negligible emitter. Africa emits roughly between 2 to 3% of the entire global emissions.
And yet we still suffer the consequences.
Yeah, we suffer the consequences, and we bring it down to Kenya. Kenya is actually a net zero carbon emitter. And so many African countries. And what needs to happen is that climate change, despite the fact that it's causing all these challenges of food insecurity, of floods, of droughts, and inflicting pain on people's lives, is also providing opportunities. And the opportunities are to change the approaches that we've depended on, or others have depended on, and actually capitalize on the opportunity that climate change is bringing. Just for example, if you look every day, 365 days, we have sunshine. But at the same time, when you look across the entire African continent, over 620 million people are energy impoverished. They don't have access to electricity. If you look at this, just to focus on this energy, if you look back in the continent, like Dr. Ri mentioned, the Paris Climate Change Agreement countries ratified it, and within this they had plans. And these plans, they focus on clean energy and also agriculture, but agriculture that works with nature, not against nature. If you look at the challenges that farmers are facing today, especially post-harvest losses, and I go back to the mama bogas where they produce their vegetables, their skuma wikis and their tomatoes, and they get spoiled because they do not have access to storage or preservation. They can be able to get affordable solar dryers. Where am I heading to? The policies, if you take the Energy Act 2019 of Kenya, where within that Energy Act, it provides an opportunity for actors to be able to produce up to 1 megawatt. And this 1 megawatt could be an opportunity to start now to reversing these post-harvest losses. But even when opportunities to provide incentives for clean energy actors to start providing solar dryers, and also bringing in financial incentives so that these mamambogas can be able to afford this solar dryer, that will be reversing the post-harvest losses. And this is a climate action opportunity, but it is providing a solution that can actually be able to leverage more opportunities for people. So the fact that Africa have contributed least to the problem, at the same time, it's also an opportunity for Africa to seize to be able to leapfrog into a pathway that is not increasing emissions, but at the same time also ensuring that people can seize opportunity, especially the youth.
Dr. Mwita, paint for me a picture. How are we looking like, say, 5 years from now, or 2 or 3 years? How far can you predict?
Well, within our capabilities, we first and foremost predicted the daily, timestamp. That's daily, we give daily predictions. We also give weekly predictions. We give monthly predictions, and we also give seasonal predictions. Now, when it goes beyond the season, then it becomes a little bit complex, but we still try to work out what the projections look like. So in essence, we now start looking at climate change projections. For example, now between 2000 and 2050, we expect the temperature, the average Kenyan temperature, to go up to about 27.9 degrees.
27.9.
From the current about 27.1 degrees. So in essence, it means that if we are looking at food security in the country, there needs to be something, there is a particular mode of agriculture that we are looking at the moment, which maybe in the next 5 years could help farmers do better. We are looking at what we are calling climate smart agriculture. And we have projects ongoing across the country which are trying to work with farmers to enable them, like he mentioned about greenhouse, but there are issues of even some indigenous varieties of, say, crops, which could possibly, grow under harsher conditions than the norm. We have, like drought-tolerant types of varieties of millet, sorghum, cassava, and so on, which can do well in much of the semi-arid and docile areas, as opposed to even the high rainfall.
But there's been a lot of controversy around that. People say GMOs and all that. We don't want to use genetically modified organisms like plants. Isn't that a cause of concern?
Well, that might be or not. I'm not sure, but the essence is that farmers are encouraged, to embrace, climate smart crops, which can ensure every season they are able to harvest. But of course, there needs to be other things that should be taken care of. Dr. Ria mentioned about issues post-harvest. How about pest invasion? What are we doing? Are we using, smart ways of controlling pests and diseases which are emerging because temperatures are shifting?
Right. And Dr. Mwita, as the assistant director, a senior assistant director of the Climate Service Met Department, I want to believe that you constantly are in touch with farmers here in Kenya on the ground. So then my question would be, do our farmers have access to this information, the accessibility of this information to help them survive and to cope with the changing mechanism? Is that information there for our farmers?
Yeah,
Can someone in Nyahururu be able to access this information?
Yes, and I would say that we have improved because initially the access wasn't as much, but over the years we have developed a lot of awareness, meeting with farmers and making them understand that this information is designed for them and it is basically specific to their needs. And for that case, the Kenya Meteorological Department in 2010, we decentralized our services across the country, such that now, since we have 47 counties, we now have a county director in charge of climate services in each of the 47 counties. And these county directors, they are in touch with farmers every season. They would even carry out programs like participatory scenario planning with the farmers and stakeholders in the agriculture and water sectors, and then discuss in terms of the climate information that is available. How do you, customize it to your specific sector so that you can be able to make better decisions? For example, if the forecast says that we expect the seasonal rains to start maybe the second week of March, what will a farmer say who is doing livestock or who is doing crop supposed to do? Probably start planning when to prepare the land, when to buy seeds, and when to start planting.
Yeah.
So in essence, that information would help them make a better informed decision rather than from what they know historically, that we expect the rains to start at such and such a time. So they work closely with the farmers and other stakeholders who are users of climate information.
All right, we have to take a quick break, but when we come back, we'll ask Peter, what are the major challenges that the farmers are facing right now as we speak? But before we do that, let's take a look at your feedback. There's a lot coming through to our studios at Citizen TV Kenya, at Zinzi_K, at Trevor Mbija, hashtag is Daybreak. And Engineer Lazaro says climate change is the most important neglected department with inaccurate weather predictions from forecasters. Food security of the nation depends on good predictions of the weather and natural calamities like drought.
All right.
We'll talk about predictions in just a bit. Is it a matter of not having good predictions, or is it people not reacting to information given to them? Let's see if we have another one here coming through to our studios. And we seem to be having a bit of a technical challenge with that, but we'll read some of your feedback coming through. We have a lot of them coming in, but we'll talk about the predictions and inaccurate predictions that Engineer Lazaro is talking about. And then we'll see whether it's a lack of information or it's a people who don't act on the information they've been given. Let's take that quick break. We'll be back with much more.